empower families and advocate for all children. For those of you new to PTA, we're an organization of nearly 3 million members working together to make every child's potential a reality. Now, we are very excited for today's conversation in our Transforming Family School Partnerships with PTA's National Standards webinar series. I'd like to start by thanking the very awesome and wonderful partner, the Institute for Educational Leadership, and Kwesi Rollins and Liz Thacker, who've worked with us to put this webinar series together and bring it to you all today. We love partnering with them to be able to bring you this great content, and you'll get to hear a little bit from a couple of members of IEL today in the webinar. So we are all here today because we know families are really essential partners in providing a high quality education for every student. And based on decades of research, we also know that schools and teachers are better off when they take the time to invest in engaging families. And students are more successful when they do so. But we know from our surveys, many of you know from your day-to-day walk and work in the field, that many schools and PTAs are not necessarily looking for, should I do family engagement? They're really looking for, how do I do this? And what are some ideas and impactful ways to move this work forward? And that's why over 20 years ago, National PTA created the National Standards for Family School Partnerships, which has served as some of the foundation and lens for this webinar series. These standards really set the bar for accountability in many school districts, as well as support and professional development. To keep this work moving and impactful. This past year, we were also really pleased with some generous support from the Overdeck Family Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation of New York to launch Family Engagement Solutions, a free online hub where you can find proven programs that have demonstrated impact on kids' outcomes from attendance to mental health and well-being. For you all to sort of be able to learn more about and partner with some of those great program providers. This year's continuation of our Transforming Family School Partnerships series has really dove deeper into some really specific topics that are on folks' minds. And there could be no greater topic on folks' minds right now than the uncertainty of sort of the federal landscape when it comes to family and school partnerships. So as a little bit of a roadmap, as Daniel mentioned, we will have an incredible panel get to join us and share some of their thoughts on what's going on. And then at the end today, we hope you will stay on. If you have to sign off, that's fine. If you choose to stay on, we'll have a more interactive component where you can get into breakout rooms and connect with your colleagues more about this topic area and where you might be able to find some support. So, as I mentioned, today's session is going to highlight the current and future landscape for family engagement policy and funding, including how to effectively advocate for policies and funding that support family engagement. I'm really excited to hear about all the work these panelists and their respective organizations are doing. And so let's just dive right in with our very wonderful moderator for today. Tanisha Holmes Garris proudly serves as a member of National PTA's Family Engagement Committee and holds membership with several PTAs and PTSAs. Her motto since childhood has been, if I can help someone along the way, then my living shall not be in vain. A true testament to her dedication to making the world a better place for kids. Tanisha, thanks for all your work you are doing for all of our families and kids, and thanks for agreeing to be our moderator today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Helen. Oh my gosh, welcome everyone. We have a really, really fun and informational packed session for you guys today. So I'd like to thank you all for showing up. And with that, I'm excited to welcome today's panelists. I will introduce you to them. And if you would like to learn more about any of our panelists, you can click one of the links in the chat box. It'll bring up the profiles for you. We have with us today Dr. Michelle Leslie Blackburn, who is she is with the Institute for Educational Leadership, Senior Policy Manager. Dr. Blackburn works to advance the policy agenda for both IEL and the Coalition for Community Schools on the federal level, focusing on the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, the Clery Act, and the accreditation information. Welcome, Dr. Blackburn. We also have with us Leslie Pollock Trainer, who is the Senior Policy Manager at National PTA, managing the national policy portfolio for the association. Leslie holds a Juris Doctorate from Georgetown Law, where she specializes in the study of agency and legislative law. She is an expert in securing government funding and policy solutions, and on behalf of the nonprofit organizations and their members. Welcome, Leslie. And last but definitely not least, we have Nikki Indikovich. Oh, I'm so sorry. I practiced your name several times. I apologize. Who is the advocate, who is the advocacy and federal legislative chair for Arizona PTA, where she leads the statewide advocacy efforts that addresses children's needs across Arizona. In addition to her PTA roles, Nikki is currently the outreach director for Save Our Schools Arizona. Welcome, Nikki. We're going to move quite rapidly into our question and answer sessions. So I will pose some questions to our our panelists today who will answer in turn. I would like to ask that you guys try to stay to a 3-minute time frame for our responses because we have a lot of information to get through. And if you're in the chat box, if you have questions, we'll be monitoring the chat box, but please feel free to also use the question and answer section of the webinar. Starting with you, Dr. Blackburn. Thank you guys all for taking your busy time out of your schedule. And I would like to start by recognizing that there's a lot happening nationally, and it's becoming hard to keep track of current federal education policies. Some of what's being reported on is confusing, and honestly, as a parent, it's even kind of scary. To open today's conversation, panelists, what advice or recommendations would you make to those who want to be up to date on federal education politics, but might feel overwhelmed by the news? We will each have, like I said, 3 minutes to respond, starting with you, Dr. Blackburn.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. So this might sound contradictory to the prompt, but I say take a break from the news, from whatever form of media you consume, or whether that is the national news, looking online, webinars, podcasts, Instagram, whatever that means to you. Take a break from it for a little bit. A lot of this can feel overwhelming. It can feel like what may be true at breakfast may be overturned or not true, or people change their minds by dinner time. And it can be really hard to keep up with all of it. So, and it can be all consuming if you let it be. So I do think it's important to be informed, but it's also important to have a balance between knowing what's going on and what impacts you. And this also means knowing what you can and cannot control. You cannot control what Congress does, nor can I, but you can control how you react to what Congress does, what the president does, et cetera. And you can control how you react to it. So whether this means taking action by calling your senator, or turning off the news and going outside to enjoy a walk, whatever brings you joy. For me, it's playing with my kiddo. Just really working to find a balance of staying informed of what you need to know, but not letting it consume you or becoming so invested in what's going on that it's very hard to keep going on with your day-to-day work. So I say stay in touch, stay informed, but also take a break.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. Forgive me. I was a little shy on the unmute button there because I'm taking notes and paying attention. Leslie, we'd love to hear your input.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And just, times 100 to what Michelle Leslie Blackburn has said as well. But I think, first of all, I wanted to say, if folks who are listening right now are feeling overwhelmed, that makes sense because the world is overwhelming right now. So just to recognize that it's a really reasonable reaction to everything going on in the world, domestically, internationally. the news is really overwhelming. So giving yourself grace and knowing that that is a reasonable reaction. And also, I think it shows that you care. It would be so much easier to ignore what's going on, but these are things that are impacting kids and families, and maybe you personally, maybe someone you know. Maybe it's not impacting you, but you really care about some of these things that the government is doing, and you want to be involved. So I think that is you're already in the right place. Your heart is in the right place. I think my best advice to kind of tackle the overwhelming world of news right now in the education national education landscape. One is follow organizations you care about. You know, part of my job as part of the government affairs team at National PTA is to curate content to make sure that our folks who are receiving our communications are hearing, the absolute most essential news of the time, and that we are explaining that news to them in a way that is understandable, accessible, and empowering. Because we don't just want to scare you, we want to direct you towards how you can take action. And so that's part of the job of organizations like National PTA. So maybe, it's National PTA, maybe it's Education Trust, maybe it's IEL, follow all of us if you care about our work, and we'll help sort of curate that news for you. I think also on that vein, following your elected officials is helpful if you can stomach what they're saying. They are often, produce weekly newsletters that sort of tap into what's going on from their perspective. So they're a good resource for kind of the local work that's going on. Third, I would say set aside time to do sort of the news. For a while, I had news updates, notifications on my phone, and that was bombarding me all day with the latest, whatever was going on with the federal government. And I decided to turn it off. And that was such a great decision. I turned off those notifications. I now have time dedicated, every day or every week, whenever, when I kind of dip into the news and catch up. So definitely, to the point mentioned earlier, to take time to yourself. We need the emotional energy to do this type of advocacy. And you need to take that time for yourself and for the things that you care about, for your families, and then can always get back to catching up on the news. So that's it. And then my final plug is I will always say, please join your local PTA if you're not already a member, because that is going to be a great way to stay tuned into what's happening locally, sort of the news of the day that is going to be most impactful to the kids and families in your community.
Awesome, Leslie, that was amazing. And I do love join PTA. If you say it again one more time for them, join PTA, join PTA. And it's very true. Sometimes we do have to remember that every piece of information that's out there is not necessarily for us in that moment. So filter out what you need to hear, what you want to hear, and then come back to the other stuff a little bit later. Time management, information management. Having said that, Nikki, what are your thoughts on the situation?
I have a lot. First of all, +1 to everything the panelists said. I think it's really smart to kind of moderate what you allow in. At the end of the day, PTA leaders are taking on a lot of information, and we're also building a lot of relationships, and that can get really heavy. The other thing I will say about that is if you're in this room today, you already have a huge advantage because you have access to resources to help you understand the headlines. Context matters here, and understanding impact really matters. These headlines come out, and after years of doing this, I get scared. I get nervous. And the way that I kind of calm myself and center myself is to consider the context, which is often brought forward by good partners in the field. So if you've got great partners that understand policy, that understand litigation, that can walk you through this, which I know everyone does because we have great people in this space, lean on them in that moment so that you understand what the impact's going to be for your community, and you can share it out with your PTA leaders. The headlines are scary. I think you need to sometimes look away, give it a minute to settle. The other thing that I tell PTA leaders and anyone in this space is you don't have to have an answer right now. It is totally okay to say, we're not sure what this is going to do just yet. Let's take a minute. look at all of the policies, what that impact's going to be for kids, and then explain it to folks that are concerned, or then process it ourselves. Because there's so much going on, oftentimes, as been noted, we get really upset about something that's been announced, and then by the end of the day, it's been somehow rolled back or changed. So don't invest a lot of time in those early announcements. Don't allow yourself to go down the rabbit hole. And I have to plug for good news sources right here. You have got to get better at judging your news sources, which I know isn't fair to ask. We should be able to trust our news, but right now there are a lot of news sources that are just not, they're not trustworthy, and you cannot allow yourself to get mixed up in those. So if you don't know which ones to lean on in that moment, you've got a network of advocates here that will tell you, yeah, this is a really great organization putting out good information that you can share with your members in your community.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I think my biggest takeaway from that was it's okay to say, I don't know right now. In the environment that we're in, sometimes you don't have the answer right away. And I know as parents, we want to be able to give that answer right away. We want to be able to give that comfort and reassurance. And sometimes the best comfort and reassurance is letting them know that we're in the same boat with you and we're going to learn together. But to keep our conversation moving along, Dr. Blackburn, I'd like to address the next question to you, if you will. The Institute for Educational Leadership has an extensive district and school leaders network that allows you to gauge what is happening in your field. Can you tell us a little about what IEL has been hearing from your district and school leaders regarding the uncertainty around policy, funding, and especially those that relate to family engagement? Also, how is IEL responding to what their leaders are saying?
Yeah, I think what we're hearing is just that uncertainty about everything, similar to not having the answers to questions. A lot of people don't quite know what's going on, and just that sense of uncertainty and being unmoored from things that they have historically known to be true. The divestment of the federal government in education really puts state educational agencies and local education agencies in a bind. And many states across the country are looking to expand voucher or education savings accounts, which reallocates publicly funded dollars for private use. Those dollars not only mean less funding for academic inputs in schools, it also means less funding for programs like family and community engagement. We know that these programs make a difference in the lives of our students and their families and their communities, which includes academic outcomes on which schools get assessed, such as chronic absence and matriculation rates. We also know that schools and parents are frustrated by the lack of funding and the lack of regulatory support that would help to ensure these programs persist. So we know that there's a lot of questions out there, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of angst about what this means, not only for what's happening in the classroom, but what's happening outside of the classroom. What IEL is doing in response to that is that we are trying to stay in touch with our community members as much as possible so that we are able to have a grasp on what they're facing. And so when I go to the Hill, when I advocate for our family members, for our students, for our community members, that we understand what they know that will directly impact the positive things that will directly impact their communities and their schools. So I'm meeting with members of the House and Senate Appropriation Committees. Appropriations is the way through which the federal budget is funded. And I meet with their committee and their staffers to better understand what they need us to do at IEL and the Coalition for Community Schools to ensure that funding continues in fiscal year 2025, which we're currently in, and fiscal year 2026, which will start October 1. They are telling us the best way that we can support them is to have schools and district leaders, teachers, parents, students, community members, grandparents, if you will, to reach out to the representatives in Congress and their senators to tell them that these programs matter to their students and to their parents. And that if Congress doesn't fund these programs, then these programs and their benefits will cease to exist. As one staffer told me, we cannot wish our way out of this. So we're working with our networks to develop messaging guides, toolkits, scripts, templates, if you will, to equip people with the knowledge information they need to reach out to Congress, to make that phone call, to write that email and say, hey, we need this money because if you don't give it to us, it doesn't exist and these programs don't exist. We have also activated the Community Schools Policy Task Force, which is utilizing working groups that are focused on short-term and long-term strategies, as well as ways in which to mobilize local and state interest groups to work to create a groundswell of support for family engagement programs. We've also been active among several policy roundtables and coalitions, working to educate and promote public education, student support services, and parent-family engagement. This includes joining sign-on letters and adding our endorsements on Dear Colleague letters, which are letters that are circulated beyond around members of Congress so they understand which programs they want to put their support behind. And then finally, we are in the last stages of in the process of developing our policy agenda for the 119th Congress, which is this current Congress. Every Congress, we co-design our policy agenda with our network so that we know how to advocate and educate on the Hill. We make a point to hear from our networks, so we know what are the most pressing issues for our students, families, and teachers, and then we use that information to develop our priorities and strategies in our advocacy efforts. If you're interested in giving us your feedback, you can go to the link that I'll drop in the chat in just a minute to complete this survey. It only takes 10 minutes, so that's one way that you can be involved and help us kind of resolve this issue of uncertainty, is letting us know what we need to be talking to Congress about on your behalf. Oh, you're on mute, Tanisha.
Myself. Mute and I are going to work today. No, I was saying that's amazing. Some of the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing, and staying in touch with your community. One of the things, and I forgive me, I forgot who said it, but you have to filter everything that you are hearing now. And then the people you want to talk to are the people who are trying to talk to you. So as much as our representatives are elected to go out there and serve on our behalf, they don't know what we want if we don't tell them. And I know that there is a group of people out there who are very similar to me, where when you were in the beginning stages of your PTA career, going and talking to your congressperson might have been a little scary, but we have email now. So if you can't say it with your words out in person and you don't want to knock on that door, put that letter together, read it a couple times like we always are supposed to do, and then send it off. Make sure that your voices are heard. And then if you can't advocate on yourself, there are people out there like Dr. Blackburn who can help get that message out to you. Leslie, I'd like to ask you now about National PTA and the fact that it has all these robust portfolio policies with an emphasis on investing in family engagement. Could you tell our audience more about some of the major policy priority areas National PTA is advocating for at the federal level, especially those that are in front of mind in the current national landscape? And then do you have any actions that our audience can take to help support in these efforts?
Sure, yeah, certainly. And I could probably talk for about 3 hours on this topic, so I will try to keep it. First thing I'll say, though, is that I've worked in several organizations, and National PTA is an incredible organization because our mission is so important and it's so broad. So it can encompass so much. We advocate for all children. We empower families. There is just a lot that we could be working on and that we are working on, especially when it comes to the federal education landscape and, what we're doing with our national leaders to kind of encourage them to make the right decisions for children and families. So that's one thing I wanted to say. But I also wanted to make another plug for our state and local PTAs and the work that they're doing. We as national can only do so much that on the national scale, but everything that our network is doing across the country, really reflects local needs and the local community as well. So there's advocacy throughout the PTA network, and it looks different in different communities. So, but to highlight a few things that we're working on at the national level, I will say, similar to IEL, we do every couple years, we do a survey of our members. And, it's just to kind of learn from them, what are the issues that are coming top of mind for you as parents, as families, as people who care about the K-12 system, as people who care about kids. What are your top concerns? What are the issues that you would like to see National PTA working on at the national level? And so we actually launched that that survey in the fall, which was a very interesting time to kind of collect that information from folks and that feedback. And we heard a lot of different things, actually. It was a really interesting survey to get the results from. Hundreds and hundreds of people responded. But we heard so much about, caring about our students through mental health supports, supporting mental health supports in schools. We heard about IDEA funding. A lot of parents were talking to us about, the need to continue to push for IDEA funding. Online safety was something that came up a lot. Gun violence prevention was something that came up. Civil rights protections for students in school. Vouchers. There's just a whole gamut of issues that have come up, and we try to do our due diligence as National PTA to kind of work in all of those spaces. But one thing I did want to highlight today, and that's part of our priorities right now, and our bread and butter always is strengthening family engagement through national policy making. And so what does that look like? In part that is just educating national policymakers on what family engagement is. What does it mean for family engagement to be authentic, meaningful, inclusive? We take every opportunity to highlight our national standards and our family engagement solutions and all the great work that some of these folks are doing on your screen today. And so that's part of what we're doing, is just educating our policymakers as to the importance of this. But I would say also something that we've all been talking about a little bit is encouraging our national leaders to invest in these types of programs. The type of work doesn't just happen. And one of those programs that we're really excited about is the Statewide Family Engagement Centers program. That is the only federal program devoted to strengthening family school partnerships. And so we're constantly pushing the federal government to fund that program, to increase funding for that program. And we think it's just a great model to continue to build on, and a way for the federal government to show that they're invested in meaningful family engagement. We actually just led a letter amongst fellow state, local, and national organizations. We usually lead that letter every year. And we got about 74 organizations who joined the letter and said, on behalf of our organizations and our members, we really care about this particular program. We really want to see it invested in the next spending package from government. And, in a climate where there are a lot of cuts being made, it is a great time to kind of have these conversations with Congress and to have your voice heard for what you find important. Title I, IDEA, the Statewide Family Engagement Centers program. Title IV-A is another one that we push for a lot. So I think, it's been really helpful to continue to have those conversations with Congress to uplift the parent and family voice, say these are the things that parents and families care about, and that not only that, but that, investing in family engagement makes sense. It is a good return on investment when we're talking about, student well-being, student academic achievement. There's just such a ripple effect of positive things that come out of investing in these types of family engagement strategies and these programs that support those strategies. And so we're doing that education work every day, every time we meet with a member of Congress. It's part of our pitch. But I think, to that point of, continuing to have that conversation with elected officials and national leaders, we're doing that as National PTA, but you all can help us in that effort and contribute to that effort as well. I would strongly encourage you, if you're sitting at your computer and you have your phone, to take out your phone and text PTA to 50457, PTA, 3 letters, to 50457, and that will get you connected to our action alerts. And so currently we have action alerts on defending the Department of Education, protecting public schools. So you'll be tuned into all of the work that we're doing and able to easily and quickly send messages to your members of Congress. Because I know as a parent myself, there's not a lot of time in the day, and it's really helpful to have, organizations like National PTA be able to give you those opportunities really easily, straight to your phone or straight to your email, so that you can send a message to Congress and within a few minutes continue on with your day and all your other responsibilities and things. So we have action alerts, we have a newsletter, we have a legislative conference that we host in every spring. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that as the year goes on. But then also, again, connecting with your state and local PTAs. I think, we're doing a lot of work at the national level, but there's so much incredible work probably already being done in your own community. And to be able to tap into that and connect with a PTA near you would probably be a good starting place for doing this work.
Thank you so much, Leslie. You said it, you hit it on the nail. Without starting at your local PTAs, there's no national PTA. So you have to start at home first and start working with your local PTAs. And that could be something as simple as bringing a friend, bringing a neighbor, or telling a friend and telling a neighbor, because PTA today is not without telling my age, what it used to be back in the day. We're a little bit more than just bake sales now. So yes, reach out, text PTA to 50457. It's also been dropped in the chat box for you. If you don't have time to just do it for yourself, make sure you copy and paste it and send it to a friend or two today. Because just because you don't have a child in the school system, some of your friends may not have a K-12 student right now, but that doesn't mean that they don't care about our K-12 students, because PTA starts at home, and that's what family and community engagement is all about. So Nikki, thank you for all of your advocacy in Arizona, especially around supporting public education. Could you describe how Arizona PTA advocates for public education at the state level, and what's at stake, especially for rural immigrants and refugee communities?
Absolutely. So first, let me just acknowledge I'm from Arizona. We are a state that has been doing all the wrong things for education for quite some time. I will be frank when I say I'm concerned about what's happening at the federal level, but it also is not all that unfamiliar to me. A lot of these pieces that are playing out at the federal level have already been playing out in the states. And so Arizona is one of those states that has a universal voucher program. We have been defunded. Our special education kiddos have already experienced inequity in funding and policy. We've had, a lot of the policies that are being rolled out at the federal level have already been tested in not just Arizona, but a few other states. Probably if I asked everyone here, they would know a few states that should be very concerned about the state of their public schools right now. And Arizona is one of them. So we early on realized, I would say, oh my gosh, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, that the threat of privatization in Arizona was going to be something that we really paid long term for, and our kids paid for. So Arizona PTA, before we had universal vouchers, really dug in on educating our members, our leaders, and our communities about what universal vouchers look like when implemented. And ultimately, our legislature decided to pass those universal vouchers, but we had already built up kind of a little bit of a defense against some of the things that happened after with that education. Our leaders were looking for the impact we told them they could expect from a policy like this. And so as this has rolled out, what we've seen out of folks that are really plugged in is, I was told that 5 years ago, rural schools were going to close if we had universal vouchers. Here we are, right? It's exactly what we said it would be. I was told 6 years ago at an Arizona PTA conference that teacher retention was going to be a struggle if we didn't deal with their pay and working conditions, and here we are. And so what we have now is a really strong state of advocates across multiple organizations that fully understand the impact of vouchers. And I often will say to my Arizona leaders, yes, we were one of the first states with universal privatization, but we're also going to be the first state that gets to roll that back and really speak to the dangers of policies like this. And that's a big responsibility, but it's also, I think, something that Arizona is up for. We've got strong advocates in this state. They know these policies are dangerous and they're ready to fight for them. Specifically, some of our more vulnerable populations are really feeling impact here. When you talk about rural students, What we have here in Arizona is a homeschool network that qualifies for tax dollars, but has no accountability on what that education looks like. So in rural spaces, we know that we are going to see a wave of young people that have been in educational models that do not work for long-term success and learning. Now, hopefully, they will come back to their public schools and we will do everything we can to catch them up. But the reality is that our economy is going to pay a price for young people not having an educational experience that sets them up. Everyone's going to pay a price. It's not just a financial cost. You're looking at communities that will also pay a price for young people coming out of educational programming that have no standards, that do not have benchmarks that we know kids need to meet. That is going to be a huge impact. We're already seeing some signs of that. Homeschoolers returning to public schools, years behind where you would expect them to be and where they need to be for foundational skills. The second thing that's really important to keep in mind about Arizona and a lot of border states is our immigrant population here is reacting to a lot of these scary headlines. And oftentimes, what we have seen is these families will pull away from their local public school or social services that they need because they're frightened about these policies rolling out and what it could mean for them. And so you're now seeing these students that are potentially the most vulnerable in our undocumented families and our homeschoolers potentially pulling away from the systems that could keep them really stable and supported as learners. And so here in Arizona, we know what we're up against. I think federally, this country is getting ready to see some of the things that Arizona and other states have been dealing with for a long time at the federal level. But the reality is that we're also seeing a huge response to that. We have got a lot of advocates that have now seen and heard and felt tangible losses because of these failed policies, and they all have a story. And the game here in Arizona now is to get these folks to tell their story, what dangerous policy means for their kids, what it has meant for their community, and start the process of really being more retroactive or proactive on stopping this stuff before we have a generation of kids that have paid a price for some of these really dangerous models that we're seeing rolled out in states. For my states that are really far along in some of this, hang in there. I'm from Arizona. If I've got hope, I feel like we all have some hope because there is a place where we are better once we roll this stuff back and we address some of the other issues that have been plaguing public education for a long time. And if we're all united in what this should look like, I think we can come out of some of this dangerous policy with even better public schools to offer our kids and even better, stronger communities that are willing to speak up because we've paid a price, right, for some of that being implemented in the past. So stay strong. I know it's difficult and really kind of lean into understanding the impact of these policies. It is important to know what happens to young people when we roll these things out somewhat recklessly in public schools.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for your responses. You said something really powerful and really strong, and I do believe that our PTA founders would agree when I tell you that this organization itself started with the idea of hope. And so we cannot let go of hope no matter what. We started, Alice and Phoebe, they started with the hope of making a change, a hope of making schools better, a hope of making families better. So we cannot give up hope on making these changes. And unfortunately, in some cases, some of us have to hope a little bit harder than others, but we can't give up on hope that things will change and become quite better. We do have the Q&A available for those of you who have questions. There are some questions coming through on the Q&A. We will address those. So if you have any questions, please definitely drop them into the Q&A so that we can make sure that one of our panelists are able to answer them. And I would just like to thank everyone for your answers thus far. This has been a wonderful conversation. If you are like me, you probably have a note full of pages here. But before we wrap up, I'd like to start wrapping our conversation up by asking questions of each of you to share one resource to help our audience effectively advocate for policies and funding that support family engagement. And then we'll start with you, Dr. Blackburn.
Yeah. So I would be remiss if I didn't do a shameless plug for our federal policy update that we send out every month. I'll drop it in the chat right now. But we do this at the end of every month, and so I encourage you to look at that. It provides a update on what's happening in the federal level for education policy, and we also have our national conference next month in Minneapolis, our National Community Schools and Family Engagement Conference. So registration is still open. We encourage you to attend that. But I think the one resource that I want to share is that we started this webinar talking about being overwhelmed by the news and whether you can even just trust the news. So it might seem odd for me to encourage you all to do this, but I think probably one of the biggest resources that you can utilize to best to increase your advocacy efforts and make you a better advocate is to tune into a news or media source or a resource that does not align with your viewpoint or political opinions. When you do this, you can better understand what those who do not agree with you on think about these issues. So you're going to be better equipped to engage in bipartisan advocacy. So it's not about crafting a better argument, although that can be helpful. It's about understanding where there may be potential alignment or finding a place to meet in the middle and make a connection with those you advocate with and to. For example, I subscribe to the American Enterprise Institute's newsletter. And so every morning I read what they have to say about education. And by reading what these experts think about these issues, I can understand their points. And I have to be honest with you, they're not always wrong about everything. They do make some good points sometimes. I can better understand how I might have a counterpoint to some of these debates, and how we can meet in the middle for future conversations. I know lots of people that I work on the federal level, so I talk to members of Congress a lot, and I know that they're reading these resources, and so it really helps me understand how they might be making decisions on how to vote on different bills or opinions on different things that they vote in committee. And so most of the time we agree on the issues. It's just how to solve the problems where there's points of friction. So a lot of policy and advocacy is about finding a compromise. It's just people trying to solve problems. So that means a lot, at least starting to understand how people think and how they come to their conclusions. Sometimes I read things that I strongly disagree with, but that doesn't make them invalid or unreasonable. It just means that as an educator and as someone who advocates for education, I have to put my money where my mouth is and be open-minded to new ideas and new ways of solving policy problems. So I really do encourage you, and I know we talked about kind of taking a break from the news, but really challenging yourself to kind of get outside the box and think about, what is one news source that I might not be naturally inclined to look at, and really take a moment to take their argument seriously and think, okay, if this is how the people that I'm trying to advocate for, this is how they align and how they believe, what do I need to understand so I can craft a better argument to really understand where those points, those levers of influence that I can start to utilize to really help them understand what are the things that I think are important that they should support or fund.
Thank you so much for that. We'll follow up with Leslie.
Great. Yeah, I love this question, and it's hard to pick just one. There's so many great resources on our website, pta.org, especially pta.org/advocacy. There's one I really want to feature right now as part of this conversation, and it's a resource from National PTA's Family Engagement Solutions Project. I know Helen mentioned this earlier, the Family Engagement Solutions, but for those who aren't familiar, Family Engagement Solutions is a free one-stop shop online to find evidence-based family engagement programs, and the hub really empowers educators, administrators, and advocates with the tools they need to build effective partnerships between schools and families. So it's a wealth of tools, a wealth of resources. There's one in particular that we've been working on that we're really excited about. It is our advocacy guidance on securing government funding for evidence-based family engagement programs. I'm happy to pop it in the chat. that. And this research really provides guidance for parent leaders and other community members to advocate for deeper investments in family engagement nationally, across their state, and in their community. So this resource includes talking points, a template letter that you can personalize to send to your local, state, or federal policymaker, and then further resources and tools to sort of dig into this type of advocacy. So I think that resource is a really great place to start digging into this type of advocacy work on this particular topic. And I think it's just a great place to kind of learn about how to do this work in a meaningful and impactful way.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Daniel, we're going to make sure that we put all of those links in the chat box. Check the chat box. All of the links that are mentioned here today, there is a information for you. So if you haven't seen them yet, feel free to jot them down, screenshot them, or click on them. And to wrap up this conversation, this question for resources, Nikki, can I have your input?
Absolutely. So it's hard to pick one. So I little bit cheated and picked a coalition. So my resource today is for the National Coalition for Public Education, NCPE. This is a really great group that comes together and does a ton of research for us and then presents it in a way that anybody can get through it, which I find very helpful when talking to PTAs specifically, because you can go into a meeting and one parent is at their first meeting and one parent has been doing PTA for 20 years and you have to meet their need. This coalition will help you with that. What I love about coalitions and the work that they're putting out here at NCPE is they have a lot of folks at the table that are weighing in on these issues. So you've got, of course, National PTA at the table, but then you've also got some teachers groups, you've got administrative groups like our superintendents, you've got some research groups in there that really round out these resources and give you multiple different viewpoints for context. One of the things that I stress to my PTAs is that you have to understand the impact in terms of context. What does this mean for your school? Because it's not the same for the school down the road. It's not the same for the school in another state. And these coalitions, this one specifically, are really good at kind of broadening that context conversation and explaining these issues in a way that anyone can get through this work. So check them out. And definitely, I know if you're a nerdy like me, you probably want to look at a lot of the research stuff. If you're not so much, you probably want to look at a little bit more of their papers, their white papers, things like that can be a little helpful. So you can pick your poison here, whatever works for your need. And they oftentimes will update, which is even better. And I love a good toolkit, and they have a really good one right now. So check that out for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for sharing these takeaways. All resources, again, are shared by the panelists are in the chat box there in that Google Drive link. I'm now going to turn it over to Kwesi Rollins, who's going to provide us with a brief reflection of our panelist conversation today. Kwesi is a member of IEL's senior leadership team and guides IEL's portfolio of programs designed to develop and support leaders with a particular emphasis on family and community engagement, early childhood education, and community-based leadership development. Kwesi, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Tanisha, and thanks to all of the panelists for really a rich conversation, so many different ideas, perspectives, resources, etc. And these are among, for those of you looking for trusted sources, these are certainly among the kind of sources of information in moments like this that are critically important. I think, for me, one of the big takeaways is that, these first 100 days of the new administration were designed specifically to overwhelm us, scare us, to shake our foundations. This new administration has been really good at overwhelming everyone, everywhere, and not just in education. And we've all seen, kind of the evidence of that. And what's also clear is that it's still early because the first 100 days is just the first 100 days. And so we've got to figure out a way to kind of survive that onslaught, maintain our focus. And I'm so happy that Michelle started with really taking care of ourselves, finding balance. A lot of folks talk about the need to unplug and not doom scroll, etc. We need time to process and analyze the facts and what they mean. We need to go slow to go fast, to quote a proverb, because knee-jerk reactions usually aren't effective in hindsight. And we learned that through COVID, where a lot of folks were overwhelmed, acted brashly, started making decisions in small rooms, not involving critical people like parent leaders and others in community. And some of those solutions didn't really pan out. So I think, at the end of the day, we need to collect stories. I'm so glad to hear, to be reminded by our friend in Arizona that, these are not new attacks, that there's been a conservative agenda to kind of disrupt education and to shift dollars away from certain priorities, et cetera. And that's not a new agenda necessarily, although this particular form of it with this administration has been pretty challenging, to say the least. But having said that, we do still have friends on Capitol Hill. We have friends in other places, and we do need to tell those stories, particularly in red and purple states. We need to let elected officials know what is working for them, what needs to be protected, what needs to be fought for, because a lot of folks who didn't really understand how they would be impacted by the changes promised by this new administration are beginning to wake up to that reality. And so ultimately, they will, I think, begin to fight for their own interests and realize that their interests are the same as broader interests. So that's really, that's what I would say. I urge you all not to giving up is not an option. I'm known for saying we're in the change business. And when you're in the change business, you got to believe that change is possible, that our efforts will help move the needle and contribute to the world we'd like to be in. And so we can't give up. We have to work together, personally and professionally. As an old head that's been in this work for too long, what gives me hope and strength is working with people who also are trying to make the world a better place, and being in company and in partnership and in collaboration with folks who are also, doing their best to keep things moving, and to keep families engaged, and to keep supporting our most vulnerable citizens. And that's what I think will help us survive this latest onslaught. So I hope you guys will do that, and hope to see you in Minneapolis at our conference. So thanks again to Nisha and to National PTA, our partners there, and to each of these dynamic speakers.
Oh, thank you so much. You're spot on with all of your comments. I think that Dr. Blackburn said it, that we cannot wish our way out. Or was that you, Leslie? We cannot wish our way out of this. So we do have to do our due diligence and put our voices first. And speaking of voices, we have a wonderful question in our Q&A from Kevin Lyon, and I'm going to read it verbatim. I'd like to start with you, Daniel, and if any of our other panelists would like to respond to that. It's a very in-depth question, so give it your best. The question reads, and I guess he's quoting me, "We are not just bake sales now." I fully agree, but how do we make these grassroots efforts real in our local communities when our local PTA wants to keep the focus on existing school activities and not discuss more state and federal level changes? How to transform the conversation from trunk or treat and field day to Department of Education and DEI, ICE, etc. Daniel, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm happy to give kind of my 2 cents, but I really want to get Leslie and Nikki's perspective on this, because you gave some really great tools regarding this as well. I just want to start by saying too, we actually were never about bake sales in the first place. I mean, Helen read out our mission, and our mission is to make every child's potential reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all. So it's important that we recognize that advocacy is at the heart of our mission. But actually, I just want to pass the torch over to Nikki. So Nikki, can you give your 2 cents on this? I feel like you have some pretty good opinions.
I do. So I do have a lot of perspective on this. I was a region director for rural PTAs here in Arizona. I've been the advocacy chair. I've been the FLC. I work in the space. And I'm a parent. I was a PTA president. People are always shocked to hear that that's how I got in this work. I was a parent who showed up at a PTA meeting and wanted to have an impact. So the first thing you need to do with leaders that are focused on fundraising and some of the more I guess you could say micro impact to their school. First, acknowledge that there is a need for that. The reality is that there is some fundraising that needs to happen. There are some events that need to happen, and those events are not just events. Fall Fest is not just a Fall Fest. It's also community engagement. So don't cut yourself short here. These are activities that are good for advocacy because you're bringing families together. You're making them comfortable on their public school campus, which leads to them feeling ownership for that campus. I love my kids' school because I feel very comfortable walking on there. It's my school too. This is a part of our family. The second thing I think you need to acknowledge is be honest about your program. If you, at the end of the year, you should be doing a debrief on what you've done. Take a look at that. And if you spent 90% of your meetings talking about fundraising, then you have a problem, not your members, right? Because you didn't give them space in your meetings to have another conversation. And so if you find that your decision making is leading to no space for advocacy in your PTA meetings, be bold and change it. Take a minute and talk to your team, your elected local leaders, and say, I think we need to do something different in our PTA meetings. We need to give this amount of space for advocacy. And the great thing about that is that you don't have to be number one advocate ever, because you can call Nikki, right? You can have me come to your meeting and I will take a chunk of your meeting and do some top lines on what's going on and help your parents start walking towards becoming better advocates. The reality is, and I have said this to parents, and it always lands a little bit tricky, but I'm going to say it anyway. We are not going to be able to sell enough cookie dough to get ourselves out of this. Now, parents are great people. They will try. Right. And look, I always buy the cookie dough when it comes home. I am a team player. But you are not going to get there that way. You cannot. You have lost too much in your local public school, and we need it back. Those resources that you've lost during defunding, that's a direct attack on your young student. That is what that is. They are taking losses, and we have to stop them. The other thing I say that's always really, I don't know how it's going to be met, is tell on them. If you know somebody is advancing policy that's really dangerous for your school, you should tell on them. You should tell other parents. You should tell other teachers. You should let folks know this person is not looking out for your kid's best interest, and I want it to stop. Now, you don't want to confront anyone or do that, but you do want to be honest that these policies that are being pushed have impact locally. I have seen PTAs pay for staff. That's really scary. Do not do that. You do not want to be fundraising for things that the state should be providing to your families. You're giving them an out. And the last thing I will say on this, in terms of equity, PTAs can be inequitable in terms of what they can fundraise. So if we're all advocating for every child, which we are, we must acknowledge that those fundraising efforts, when not in conjunction with advocacy, can be quite inequitable. And we want to be equitable for our kiddos. We do not want one school having massive fundraising capacity meets a school that's really struggling to do other things, and the state is now defunding them further, right? We can see how that can get dangerous. I think every PTA leader has seen it play out. And knows better. So a lot of tips there. This is a huge one. I have been asked this question more than any question since I started doing PTA almost 2 decades ago. So it is the fact that folks are asking tells me they're on the right track. Keep going.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Nikki. Number one, first and foremost, my answer to that question, put it on your agenda. You have a meeting, you pass out an agenda. Put advocacy on the agenda. A lot of us go through and we talk about 5th grade this, 4th grade this, what we need here on the playground. We talk about those fundraisers, but we don't put advocacy. And if you explain it to your parents, what advocacy really is and what it means, they'll listen. You just have to put it in front of them. So you choose as your PTA leader what you present to them. So if we're failing them, it's because we didn't start the conversation. Would any of our other panelists, would you like to address this question before we move on? Hearing none, seeing none. I have one last question, and whoever wants to take on this question, I think should be the person to speak first. So the question we're going to go with is, what specific steps can be taken to engage underrepresented families in these conversations? And I'm going to do like the teacher does, and I'm going to pick Leslie.
Sure. So I will make a plug for the national standards for family school partnerships. And I think that there's a lot of good information that we have under that under those standards that could really help you to engage families who aren't, normally engaged in this. I think meeting folks where they're at is probably also just a good general, tip. Advocacy is a lot of things. And for some folks, they're not going to have time to join you for your lobbying day at your state capitol. So finding ways to provide your folks with your community with options for engaging, that's something we're working on right now. We're working on an advocacy ladder, is what we're calling it, where it's like wherever you're at in the ladder, we want to make sure that you can climb and that you can find a place where you can kind of fit in. So I think a lot of it is just meeting folks where they're at, and that might just be signing up for National PTA's action alerts and sending a quick message, every week or so when we bug you. So I think that's one way to kind of work on that, is to kind of give folks options for how they can engage with you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you to all of our presenters today. This has been a wonderful conversation. To be respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to turn things over to Daniel, who's going to close us out with some final comments and some directives for you guys. Thank you so much for being here with us. Daniel, everything's for you now.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. So again, just thank you again to our wonderful moderator, Tanisha Holmes-Garris. Thank you to our wonderful panel as well, Nikki, Leslie, Michelle. All three of you gave some really wonderful insights. It's uncertain times that we're living in currently, but it's really comforting to know that we have people like you in the field helping us lead some of these conversations. So again, thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of National PTA. So thank you. Again, I want to encourage everyone here to stay on this webinar to connect with your colleagues and discuss your own practices in navigating uncertainty in policy and funding, especially in family engagement. So after I finish closing out the panelist portion of today's webinar, we will stop the recording and allow all remaining attendees to utilize your cameras and microphones for our discussion. And I'd like to remind everyone that this session was recorded, and we'll be sending out the recording and the saved chat to everyone in a follow-up email. There will be an exit survey following this webinar, so please do take a minute to fill that out so we can continue to improve our future webinar sessions. Those of you that do need to drop off, just want to thank you sincerely for your time, for your attention, and again, for your dedication to strengthening family school partnerships, especially during these uncertain times. Never forget that our collective action and our leadership really is a vehicle for effective change that benefits children across the nation. So your voice does matter, and we hope that you do stay connected with us. So please feel free to send us an email at familyengagement@pta.org to remain connected. As I mentioned before, please stay on so you can continue the conversation with other attendees and our featured speakers. I'll give those that need to jump off a little bit of time, and then we'll head over to our discussion.